Welcome everyone. Today we're going to begin text, and today we focus a lot of text. So I want you to know I'm reading from the Hebrew translation of the Mesorah. You should know when it's come to translation there are so many, and my teachers used to say that translation is always with some type of agenda, and so I rather use more my own translation here and there. The learning today was mainly based on the Malbim. Malbim is one of the rabbis that lived at the 15th century, early 16th century. And he wrote the commentary on many books in the Tanakh. He was also a student of my great-grandfather, the Rabbi of Zidi Choi. But anyway, his foundation for the interpretation of Book of Job, I find it very comforting and very good. So that's the basic. So a little bit about the chapter, the second one. In the first chapter, Job passed the test. And we explained last week and week before that Job has trials, but he is not on trial. And it's important for us to remember that line. A person has trials, but he is not on trials. And why is so important? Because we explained the first week and last week that this book is more about trusting God than about answers to every question. So in that sense, the first chapter dealt with Job kind of passed the test, if you want to use that term, but here we respond the way that in the lab of the Almighty that was expected. In short, the man was very wealthy, God gave him everything, and then the Satan came and said, it's not fair, big deal to follow your direction when a person have a great wealth. Then he started losing, but he still said, like we said, upon losing our loved one, the Almighty has given, the Almighty has taken away, bless His name. If you remember, during the procession of the burial, that's part of what we say, Hashem Natan, Hashem Lakach, the Almighty has given, take away, and we bless His name. And we conclude this chapter by saying, despite all this, Job did not sin nor ascribe improperly to God. So, as we said last week, by us, unlike for example, some branch in Christianity that teach about prosperity, it's like, all right, you worship God, you're going to be prosper. We do not go that way in Judaism. We don't say that you go to a synagogue with a laundry list, and because I sacrifice my morning or evening or whatever to come to the synagogue, God help me with my stocks or help me with my health, etc. It doesn't work with God this way. Obviously, we believe in the reward and punishment, but Judaism is not a religion of prosperity in a sense that you go to some, and I'm not condemn any other religion. I'm just saying that Judaism is different. There are other faith groups that promise if you go to the house of worship or you do certain things, then things happen to you. So here he passed this type of trial by saying, God has given, God has taken, may His name be blessed. Now you should know some definition before we go to this chapter. In the Hebrew language, especially in the Tanakh, in the language of the canon, when they use the word birkat or bracha, which is by the way my daughter's name, it's sometimes contain double meaning. Like if you remember the other day we talked about the word eved that has like 7-8 meaning. The word bracha or birkat can be a blessing, but can be also a biblical text that instead of using the word curse, they use the word bless in just It's called Sagina Hor. So you what? Reverse understanding, which almost like quote unquote. It's called Lashon Nekiya. It's also when he used the word Sachta, Sin Kaf Taf here, it's like God protected. Also, when you use the term Od Ze Medaber Veze Ba, meaning someone left and someone comes in, that's the biblical language of expressions. Again, anthropomorphic human language of expressions. So, as we said, Job said, God is giving, God is taken away. He passed that. But that test, that trial was only over property. He has a lot of properties, he lost his properties. But here is the hardest, is the next one. So chapter 2, please open. I'm reading both my Hebrew and English. I believe that the way I translated is the proper one. If there's any comment, let me know. Vayhi Hayom, you shall know in the biblical term, the Talmud tells to us, when it's come the day, Vayhi is always something said. That day happened. So what is that day? What is the day? I give you a hint, we're getting close. What is the day that all the books are open and the Almighty hear those who wants to speak in the merit and those who want to say bad things, and all the deeds come before God and He makes the decision? Obviously is what? Very good. That's Rosh Hashanah. So the commentators tells us that Vayhi Hayom, it was Rosh Hashanah. Vayavou bnei ha'elohim li'ityatzeb, meaning lucidly meaning the sons of God. But we explained last week, it's also in Greek methodology, it's called the pleroma, meaning the entities around God. When we use the term kadosh, 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 doing services, right? The week and Shabbat, we said kadosh, kadosh, doing kedusha. It's expression of the pleroma, those entities around God. And there's again in human language is like the chariot, the great chair of glory of God, and they are kind of in our language around God. There is a special literature, it's called Sifrut Heichalot Merkava, that's a literature believed to be 3rd, 4th century that speaks about different levels of understanding God. So this is the entities that we call in our Sidurim, Va'ofanim V'chayot HaKodesh, is like all kind of godly entity, again, in our language. So they get together before God, and then Vayavo Gam HaSatan Betocham. Another entity that created by God was the Satan, which again, for us, we can call him names, angel of death, Satan, Sitra, it's all kind of name. But he also came as one of those godly created entity. But here, they add 3 words that wasn't in the previous chapter or no other place in the book. They use the word li'ityatzeb al Hashem, which means to stand before the Almighty God. What does that mean? They are all around God. And these words repeat twice. If you look at the sentence, it's written twice. Listen the language, how it's written. Vayhi Hayom, the Rosh Hashanah day came in. Vayavou bnei ha'elohim, and all these godly entities, lehityatzeb al Adonai, to stand before the Almighty God. Vayavo gam HaSatan betocham, and the Satan came upon them, lehityatzeb al Adonai. So you have in one pasuk, twice the same line, but we ascribe almost like an exclusion in a separate, unique exception entity of Satan, that he is also there to stand before God. Why is that? The Malbim, as we said, have a long explanation to that. I'll give you the vignette, the abbreviation. He hold that the Satan came in with a total different approach, total different claim, asking God to test him in a different way. What does that mean? There is a regular way that a person tested when you have everything, and we believe we're always on trial. So in that sense, even Job is his trial, but he's not on trial, but that trial involved with his withstanding with his faith when you have everything. But this is total different stage. Since you already thank God, now you go to the next step, which is Vayomer Adonai la Satan ei mizeh tavo. In our language, God wanted to begin conversation. Remember Ayeka, when the Almighty talked to Adam, the first man, he said, "Where are you?" We all ask the question. God doesn't know where's Cain, right? Cain killed Abel, right? So God said, Cain killed Abel. So God said to him, "Where are you?" And obviously God knew clearly where is it. But it's almost like either he tried to make him like a coward, or basically he wants in our language to have conversation. It's almost like God in search of man. God wants to have conversation. So God have a conversation here, and he wants to hear what you have to say. So Vayana Satan, so the Satan respond to God and he said, Mishut ba'aretz u'mitalech ba'az. That's almost saying that I'm in a different planet. I'm the world, mundane world below, and I did my job downstairs, and I'm back to report to you, God. So in a sense, obviously we know that God is everywhere, and there's no Shtei Reshuyot, there's no God like two or more, it's one God. But in that sense, it's like formally kind of have a conversation with God and give a report to God what happened. And why it's important? Because we understand the mindset. The mindset is basically is saying, okay, it's like, okay, Job passed the test, yes or no? What exactly happened? And look how he reports, sentence 3. ויאמר אדוני אל השטן, שמת לבך אל עבדי איוב כי אין כמוהו בארץ. The Almighty said to Satan, did you pay your heart to my servant Job, that is no one else in the whole land, איש תם, an honest man, וישר, full-hearted, ירא אלוהים, man of fear of God, וסר מרע, and stand from evil, ועודנו מחזיק בטומאתו. You claim in the previous chapter that the only reason for Job to behave like that, it's because I gave him all this wealth and family and everything. But here we meet again, and Job thanking me, and he expressed his faith despite all this hardship. So in that sense, God said, "Vatziteni belevalo chinam," is like blaming the Satan. What do you want from me? Why you try to convince me to be harsh with my servant Job, since he already passed the test? He did. You claim in the previous chapter, Satan, that I should put him on trial, and you see that if he stand that trial, and I did it, and now you basically instigated me in a way, God said, to do all this, and it was all in vain. It wasn't a serious reason to do that. So there are several points. The first one is, you see we said that he has trials, meaning the first one is a trial of wealth. Person lose money, lose wealth. But here it's the trial of poverty. How far, when a person used to have a lot of things, and all of a sudden, God forbid, is a crisis, and he didn't have insurance, and he lost his wealth, whatever it is. And you see, remember we talked about Professor Leibowitz last week, you see people's reaction in time of crisis. You discover the real face when they have great crisis. Now, he is a crisis that he lost his wealth, and we want to see how exactly he reacts next step. So students of the Chafetz Chaim, the great rabbi of Radin, asked him, what is that? Why God needs to go to all this process of clarification? We said that it's the wisdom of God and for us to understand. So he explained beautifully. He said, look, when you go to college, You have the first degree, then you go to a master's degree, then you go to a PhD, then you're teaching. It's a process, it's the different stages. He passed the trial of wealth. Now, since he was so good, he did so well, you go to the next level, which is test of the other way. Now, obviously, that's much harder. It was a great rabbi, also Kabbalist at the 13th century, was blind. His name is Rabbi Sagi Nahor. Sagi Nahor meaning the blind. So he said that you see the real face of a person, the real revealing of the psyche, of the level of faith when a person have a tremendous challenges. Then you see how serious. It's almost like when I went to the army, and I remember those years, they used to have a special training. And you see in a time of crisis, when it's getting harder and harder, certain reaction of certain people and how they withstand. So he said, we believe that before the baby is born, they teach the child, the Talmud said, the whole Torah. So he said, in that sense, is a person chance to reflect, to remember. When you have everything, it's not always like we read 2 weeks ago in the Torah, that we forget. When a person is fat and have everything, he forget. And it's a time to reflect and remember those, like King David said in Psalm 23, that he reflected and he remembered those moments that he have everything. So that's hard to go back to the original moment and remembering those moments. And God was there, so God is here too. Now, the next step is why we said Yotzev. We ask a question, why does Satan need to stand before the Lord separately? So we said, based on the Rambam, there are different difficulties. There is a concept that the person eating well and exercising every day and doing everything physically right. And you have something that is in the nature, meaning that beyond control. But in general, the structure of the physician, like the Rambam, he said, as long as you eat properly, sleep properly, exercise properly, you should live a proper, healthy life. So here is the difference between the first chapter and this one. The first chapter, God gave a special licensing to the Satan to go ahead and take away his wealth, right? The next one, he's going to something much deeper, which is almost changing the nature. So by nature, a righteous like Job supposed to survive those challenges we're about to read. But because it's a special trial, so it's almost like lehityatzeb that the Satan have a special permission asking God to go ahead only not to take his life, but other than that to go after his physical body, his physical capability of survival at the time of crisis. I remember years back was a fellow, should never happen to anybody, lost his 2 legs and one of his hand, young man. And I was shocked and amazed and impressed how strongly you have faith, even all these future cut off just in a very short time, overnight, over one of those terrorist explosions. So the idea of people behave in a certain way, they make money, they lose money, they feel almost like they're in a casino. But the moment it hits their personal, physical health, especially a righteous man like Job that live healthy according to the way that he should, that's a lehityatzeb. That's the reason why the pasuk said twice lehityatzeb al Hashem, which means that the Satan asked for a special permission to go to this type of trial, which is not conventional and not the structure of God's creation. So he said here, in a dialogue between Satan and God, God said to him up to sentence 4, why, again it's human language, why you instigated me to do all of that? To go and test him and all of that. You see how faithful is he. So Satan, as a Satan, he responds, sentence 4, and he said, Vayana Satan, the Satan responded to the Lord, and he said, Vayomar, Or be'ad or v'chol asher la'ish yiten ba'ad nafsho. That's such a strong line. He said, skin for the sake of skin. What does that mean, skin for the sake of skin? This is very painful and deep. So, as we said, in the Hebrew language, the word or, skin, can have more than one meaning. They have the body, the skin that covers the physical body of a person. But you have, for example, a coat, me'il or, special skin coat, lucidly, which means in a cold winter, there are people who have this type of coat that cover them from cold. So here is the painful point. He said to him, look, all of this losing of property or losing of wealth is one thing. But I want to see or be'ad or. I want to see if you get under his skin, if you start hitting him physically to his very basic survival, how far he can take it. I remember years back, I don't want to mention his name because I still think that it's confidential, but he was one of the highest officer in Israeli intelligence. The first name was Shlomo. And if he's watching me from Eilat, God bless you. Anyway, Shlomo, his specialty was interrogation. He used to do for the secret services interrogation, and he in those years when he was like second general or something like that, he was hired by the Pentagon to be a trainer of Marines and other forces, Rangers, whatever they are, to do interrogation. That's his specialty. So one of the things he told me, I learned from him a lot of things. He is now in the private sector, he's an attorney, and he was a candidate to be a judge. Anyway, he said that in every single person there are soft spots. You just need to discover them. That's number one, they teach in intelligence. There's no such a thing, a person without soft spot. You just need to find them. Number two, he said, when it's come to interrogation, you always need to know where exactly is the broken point. And you have to hit him until you reach that point, because the moment you overdo it, like in totalitarian or dictatorial countries, you cross that line, you kill the person. That's bad because you lose the potential of great information. So Russian and others have, in an intelligent community, they have this capability to recognize how far you can torture or abuse the person and reach the point that he or she can give you information, but you have to know where is the cross line that you basically kill him and you lose. Excuse me. So the same here. The Satan said to God, or be'ad or. I want to see all of these claims. Fine, he passed the first one. But let's go to the next stage, which is, let's see how he reacts to a physical suffering. So he said here the word, v'chol asher la'ish yiten be'ad nafsho. That's such a strong line. He said, whatever a man has, he will give up for his life. So a normal person that sanctify life and know the value of life, so obviously he or she will do the very best to survive. Now we should understand, I need a little bit to go deeper with the Malbim because it's so beautiful. He said, there is a concept that's called Ashgacha Pratit. Ashgacha Pratit meaning you have the divine providence that protected you. God said to Noah, go to the ark. I'm going to create a great flood, so go and be saved by going to the flood, to the ark, and you will be saved there. So it's kind of, God protected you from kind of nature phenomena. That's, we all know in the Torah. You see the same thing with the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot, Abraham's nephew, get a signal from those emissary, from those angels of God, to go and either stay in that place, or they pull him out from Sodom and Gomorrah and rescue him in the cave. So there is a concept, you see it several times in the Torah, that almost like God said, I'll protect you, I'll shield you, I'll watch over you, etc. Now, there is a situation that the person cannot control. When is that? Is a story like Job. Meaning, even a person does everything right, eat healthy, exercise healthy, do everything right, you can be protected as long as it's not a kind of divine decree to do something. That's what we pray on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, right? Who shall live, who shall die, who shall be rich, who shall be poor, who shall suffer, who's not. And it's a prayer for us and a prayer for the whole world. The same here. There are certain things that we can live in a certain box and believe that if you do everything right, everything is going to be okay. Yet, there are certain things that are beyond us. For example, the text said that when the Satan gets an order, he is not distinguished between righteous and wicked. So for example, if you are in a place that there is a earthquake, God forbid, or you are in a place of tsunami, or you're in a place of terrorist attack, or all kind of other crises in the world, so no matter how righteous you are or not, by merely fact that you are there, if you are, in a sense, in a capability not to go there, you take all the chances to think twice what you're doing and how, that's different story. But if you are there because of your failure, the Rambam has a fascinating thought. The Rambam is a physician, a philosopher. He used to say in many of his writings, he said, most of the human crisis created by the person itself, which means you are your own enemies. A lot of time, just look upon yourself and you made certain mistakes that because of them, you have what you have now. That's the Rambam's idea. Now here we face, which we call the exception, a person in a level of Job that did everything right, but thing happened. So in that sense, as we said, the book is not so much answering questions, but more in God's wisdom to show that there's a gradation, and someone reached the level of Job, there is a total different structure of tests. So here you see what happened. They said, sentence 5, he said to him, Ulam shlach na yadcha vega el atzmo ve'el besaro, im lo el panecha yevarchecha. Sentence 5, that's frightening sentence, very strong sentence. What we said in sentence 4? Sentence 4 we said that skin for skin. And what we said, skin for skin, trace a situation, God forbid should never happen to anybody. You're walking with a fancy coat, cost you a lot of money. And all of a sudden you walk on the street, let's say in Mexico City, right? And a guy pull up a gun, even in the middle of the day, and said, pick and choose. Either you give me your coat, or I'm going to shoot you. What are you going to do?
Give him the coat.
Obviously you give him a coat. Or be'ad or be'ad or, the Malbim said, is people willing to sacrifice even, God forbid, a hand for the head. Which means, if you have a certain cancer and you know they need to cut part of your body in order for you to survive, most of the people are willing to do that instead of dying. So if you have a choice between the first chapter, which is dealing with losing properties, or be'ad or, skin for skin, the Satan said to him, God, all right, he passed the first test, but that's not really attached to himself, to his ego, to his own being. Let's see if he passed the next one, which is dealing with physical suffering. That's much harder. So here we reach a point that the Satan said in sentence 5, he said this, but send forth your hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and surely he will blaspheme you to your face. So several things. Number one, they use yevarechecha, as we said. It's actually curse, but they use the term yevarechecha because the text wants to use a nice language, okay? And it's like, you're going to touch his body, he is going to turn around, as Satan said, and he's no longer going to bless you, but bless, quote unquote, you, God. That's one claim. Furthermore, there is a concept in a lot of rabbinic writing. It's called serving God out of fear or serving God out of love. It's called oved me'irah, oved me'ahava. Meaning, you're driving your car 3 in the morning. There's no one there. You see a red light and it's forever. Stand there. It's supposed to be 30 seconds. It's 3 minutes. And you're so tired. And you're standing there and you want to go to your destination. And you look around. There is no surveillance. There is no camera. Right? What's the reason you're still standing there? Most of the people, they're afraid to get a ticket. Right? How many people standing there because they just abide because that's the law of the land? I don't know. I assume not everyone. In a way, lucidly, that's the idea. There are people who serving God because they're afraid of punishment. They're afraid that something will happen to them if they don't do. I cannot tell you in 22 years as a rabbi how many people told me they come to say Yizkor because they're afraid that the deceased parents will curse them out if they don't show up. Right? Or I heard it many times. Or people does all kind of saying Kaddish and things out of fear that the spirit of the deceased will be angry at them. Right? So there are different levels of serving God. There are those who serve God out of fear. There are those who serve God out of love. This is part of the wisdom of God in the book. The dialogue between Satan and God is searching deep down the level of faith of a person. It's not the protagonist, it's not the Job, it's the mindset of the creature, of the creator, who we are. So here, in a sense, Satan said to God, look, he is a good guy as long as you give him everything. You took away everything, he still bless you good. Let's see if you get under his skin, if he's not going to curse you, or is not going to behave very differently. And in a way, at least in part, the Satan win. Soon you see how, at least in part. What happened now, he said to him, Vayomer Adonai el Satan, hino biadcha echet nafsho shmo. That's very harsh sentence. He said to him, look, he is in your hand. You do whatever you think is right, but preserve his soul from death. So I allow you to do everything you want. It's almost like the officer when he wants to interrogate a prisoner, right? Of war or of enemies, or it was a, let's say, God forbid, it happened just now in Spain, right? Big terrorist attack, you're a police officer, you take the guys, and you, I hope they don't do that, but you beat them up or do whatever it is, and you get the information, whatever you need, right? Legal, not legal, they do a lot of things, right? Behind closed doors. So there is a point, as we said earlier, that you said up to that point you can do, you cannot cross that line. So God said to Satan, do whatever needed, but don't take away his life. So the next thing, ויצא השטן מאת פני אדוני ויח את איוב בשכין רע מכף רגלו עד קודקודו. Meaning the Satan left and he did something very, very strong. What did he do? He afflicted Job with severe boils from the sole of his feet to the top of his head. ויקח לו חרס להתגרד בו. So he took a potsherd to scratch himself with, and he sat amid the ashes. Meaning, the Malbim and others said that his body was like divided to two with this boil. Half of the body was total dry, another half was wet. So in the old day, in order to survive that, you need to put your body with the ashes, and in that sense, it take away part of the itching, tremendous itching around your body, and you take this whatever you call that tool, and you move it, scratch yourself to reduce the tremendous itching you have in your body. But this is kind of double punishment. First, in his body. Second, he cannot wear any garments. Third, it's two different types of diseases, and it's very painful, and he needs to be half of the body in the ashes, half of the body out in the air. So at this point you see something very interesting. You see his wife interfere, and his wife speak up. ותאמר לו אשתו, איוב, Job's wife said to him, עודך מחזיק בטומאתך? Do you still maintain your whole manless? You still believe in God and you still behave like that? Even all of that happened to you? Barech Elohim vamut. She said to him what? She said to him, Barech literally meaning bless God. But it means blaspheme God and die. Two ways. Either she believed in God and she believed, the Torah said if someone, quote unquote bless God, so he deserved death. So she believed that the next step is you will be so frustrated and so angry with God, so he's going to curse and God is going to take his life. So she reached a point that either you said she had Rahmanus on him, or you said that she couldn't stand his suffering, or she could not live. I can tell you again in my 22 years how many times you see a spouse sitting next to a person. I saw particularly women, and the last year of a person before he passed away, it's so overwhelmingly difficult. I have one case, two actually, that we used to do Mishaberach. Mishaberach is a prayer for those people to get better. And we as a traditional Jews believe in the power of our prayer. We believe that if we pray for a certain soul, so in a way God helps someone even if the person is in the other part of the globe. So one time I visited a person in a great suffering, and his wife said to me, can you pray that he will die quickly? And I was like torn over that, because in one hand it was encouraging. I was a new rabbi in New Jersey at that time, about 20 years ago. And I felt one side of me said, is a secular people, and she believed in the power of the prayer in such a level that in a way the clergy or her prayer can make this happen by praying. On the other hand, it showed me that she reached a point that she could not really live with this level of agony and suffering with a situation like that. It's a matter of fact that I have another case, just a side note, that I told her for a long time that she should hire a professional to take care, but they lived together for so many years, and she couldn't take the fact that somebody else come from different country, hardly speak English, and take care of their husband. And I told her one time, I said, you're going to pay the price. Sure enough, after the burial, a few weeks later, she was in such a painful agony of her body, most probably is a result of so long of restraining and suffering. So in that sense, you can go one way to say that she said to her husband, just curse God and die. But there is a Malbim, again I told you at the beginning that he is one of the commentary that have a fascinating thought. He said no. She was so smart, she said to him, look, when you are at the highest level, you bless God. And you bless God all the time, so God took away everything from you. He took away your wealth, He took away everything from you. Keep blessing God, and the next thing He's going to do to you is going to take away your life. But either way, she basically asked him to do something like that. Look at his reaction. It's again fascinating, because I feel when I read it so relate with my daily connection with people, that how people talk when they are in a sadness, in crisis, in nursing home, in hospitals, at their homes. It's very interesting the way they're thinking. She said to him, you are still believing God the way I remember you? I can't believe you are the, bless God or curse God and die. And then he responded to her and he said, Vayomer elea, he said to her, Kedaber achat hanevelot tedabri. He said to her, how dare you to talk like that? You are speaking like it's hard for me to translate it literally. Foolish. Okay, I don't think that foolish is the correct one. Nevela in Hebrew is like very strong and negative words. It's like you speaking like someone who's disgraced. I think to be better, correct. Like in Yiddish you said nevele. It's like a non-kosher animal, right? Like a dead animal, carcass animal. So he said, you talk like that. He says, גם את הטוב נקבל מאת האלוהים ואת הרע לא נקבל. You forget all those years that we have so much goods. We have our mansions, we have our horses and donkeys and wealth and everything. All these goods you believe that God gave us. So now when it's a hard time, you all of a sudden you don't believe. So number one, you see the word Elohim. In the Kabbalistic literature, they say that there are many attributes of God, and therefore there's a different name of God. So when you see the name Elohim, is usually God of judgment. So in a sense, he said to her, he's the same God. And God gave us everything one time. So you bless him at that time. Now all of a sudden, because you take it, you start changing yourself and you're talking against God. He said, בכל זאת לא חטא איוב בשפתיו. And this is a very important line. Job did not sin with his lips. And the rabbis go after that line. They said, what do you mean in his lips? Some commentator said, in his heart he's already getting angry at God. But in his lips, he did not express this. Anyway, so now the second part of this chapter is his friends. And as we said at the beginning, you can take it in many different ways, how friends react to certain crises. Because all those people were with him, business friends and other friends, all of a sudden they hear that his crisis, they see a different reactions. So you see in sentence 11, וישמעו שלושה רעי איוב את כל הרעה הזאת הבאה אליו. The three friends of Job heard all this total calamity that befallen upon him. So ויבואו איש במקומו. So they came from three different places. אליפז התימני, בלדד השוחי, צופר הנעמתי. So they all come together. ויוועדו יחדיו, they get together, they convene together, לבוא לנוד לו ולנחמו. They came there for two purposes. Number one, they want to mourn with him and comfort him. Which learn a lot of Jewish law and Jewish thoughts. That someone is in a crisis, you try to show your feelings. Here the man lost his children, lost his wealth. So these three friends from different locations, soon you see their expressions. They came from different locations and try to be connected. And they ויסעו את עיניהם מרחוק ולא הכירו. They came and they saw him from afar and they totally disrecognize him. As you know, person looks different when he is a normal versus when he have this boil around his body and he lose everything. So they did not recognize him. ויסעו כולם ויבכו, they cried, they weep very deeply. ויקראו איש מעילו, that's part of Jewish law, you know, but it's here not necessarily, Job is not necessarily Jewish, but we know that tearing the garments is part of expression of mourning. ויזרקו עפר על ראשיהם, they put an ashes at the top of their heads, השמיימה. So some say that in the ancient Eastern culture, some said that it was in the Akkadians, others said it was a Mesopotamians, or whatever. It was an old Near Eastern culture that they used to take ashes and throw it up to heaven as part of mourning. Put ashes to the head, put ashes up. Anyway, וישבו איתו לארץ 7 ימים, they set Shiva 7 days with him. Again, you can have implication of the Shiva. Number 7 play a lot in the Tanakh. ושבעת לילות, but listen something important in Jewish law. ואין דובר אליו דבר כי גרעו כי גדל הכאב מאוד. they do not speak a word to him. They display equanimity, they are total silent because they feel his pain, and for they saw his pain that it was so very great they didn't want even to say anything. Now we derive from that a very important halakha, Jewish law, that when you go to a mourner's house, you should sit quiet and wait for them to begin the conversation. That's a well-known rule in Jewish law because it's very unpredictable and unknown, their pain and their feelings, and it's a time to sit, and many people misconstrue. They think if you come and you start talking about politics and about stock market, that brings them happiness. No. By Jewish law, you come there, you sit there and wait for them to begin the conversation. We derive it from that as well as other. Here I must digress for a second. The Rambam brings one of the well-known Arab scholars of the 8th, 9th century, which Rabbeinu Bachya ibn Pakuda and others quote. His name is Muhammad al-Ghazali. Muhammad al-Ghazali was a Sufi scholar. He wrote many books. One of them is called The Alchemy of Happiness, translation from Arabic. And he talked there about kind of two attributes of God, which is fascinating because the Rambam quoted him. One is the God is transcendental. Another one is the same God that is the divine providence, the Neoplatonic, the God that's involved in day by day. But he said another phase to that. He says, the higher the soul of a person, the more general soul he or she have. And that's deep. So already we're going to swim deeper now. The idea of Al-Ghazali, which you see it a lot in rabbinic literature, you see it in the Duty of the Hearts from Rabbeinu Bachya, you see it in the Kabbalistic literature of Provence and Girona, and you see it later on in the Ari literature, is the idea that you have a regular soul that have, let's call it level 3. And you have a soul level 2, soul level 1, and it's different level. So soul 1 is a soul that is called Neshama Klalit, is a soul that contains all the other souls. So if you have a leader, that leader have kind of double souls. You have the soul of himself, and you have the soul that pertain to everyone else. So in that sense, Job represents the soul not only of himself, but the soul of the people. The feeling of the people is almost like we read about the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, when he confesses at the time of the temple, which we read in the Musaf on Yom Kippur. He asks for himself, his family, and then he brings another offering, and he talks about the community, about the nation, and about the world. So in that sense, Job represents not just he and his situation, by merely fact that the three friends are together and they are sitting silently and they have nothing to say. We said in ניתנה Tokef, in the most emotional prayer on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we said is a description. They open the books, Rosh Hashanah Yikatevun, etc. And then we said a line, V'kol dmama daka yishama. It will be a moment that there is no one can say anything, meaning the moment that the Lord really look in our language on the books and judge, there is nothing. It's a moment that no one can speak. It's almost like the judge read before he brings the verdict to us. So as you see, the last line said, Acharei ken, after it was a 7 days and 7 nights of quiet, only then patach Eov et piu, Job opened his mouth, vaykalel et yomo, and he started cursing his day, not God. He's cursed the day. Soon you see in the next chapter, he basically cursed the day of his birth, cursed the day that he came to this world. It's like someone said, why God brought me to this family, why God brought me to this country, why God brought me to this situation, why I'm here, and it's like curse, not God. But so you see here that Job was the one who began the conversation. But the derivative from that, there is a book called Sefer Abahir. It's a beautiful Kabbalistic book that we believe that was written at the end of the 12th century. And in that book, he speaks about the Neoplatonic, which is the appearance of God in our daily life. And if you just take this text and you see how many, not only Jews, but so many millions of Christians study it all the time, because the people in general find a lot of applications for this dynamic to the lifetime. The whole idea of the other side, you call it names, Sitra Achra, negative world, Satan, all this dialogue with the other side, they call it all kind of names, but it's there to do something that the Rambam, however, at the same time wrote the Guide for the Perplexed, which is the Aristotelian teaching, try to tell us that don't try to go more than you understand. Just go by level of understanding and try to do your best under that circumstance, because there are situations that you cannot control. And for that said, we need to understand, which they call in the literature of the Kabbalah, based on that, the triangle. Triangle meaning nothing to do with Christianity. It's God, right? And you have the other, the world. It's like G, God, world, and you have H, the humanity. So in that sense, God is everything, but also God is the one who watch over all these phases. And because we are very limited, we have, which we call in the literature, machshava, the thought, the speech, it's called dibur, and maaseh, the actions. So you see in the behavior of Job, is a lot of thoughts, a lot of feeling, some expression by the end of this chapter, but no action. Job did not went so far out of his way. To very end of the book, we're going to see how he demand God. I want you to come right now and tell me what's going on now, and I cannot take it anymore. And you have to come here and you have to tell me what's going on. But that's the very end of the book. He is now in a stage that much earlier, which is in his thought, he starts understand is a new world, a new life. He doesn't know in that sense that God is planning to grant him double by the end. He in some ways almost forget all the years that he was in a great life and a great prosperity. And by the end of this chapter, unlike the previous one that he still blessed God, by the end of this chapter he's almost a heretic. He starts saying indirectly a word of heresy, which is why I was born, I curse the day I was born, etc. So in a way it's good for us to study it close to Rosh Hashanah, because all the rabbis tells us that we're getting close to Rosh Hashanah, they open the books and we have an inventory and we have a self-search and we learn how to be a better people and we commit ourselves to a certain resolution for the beginning of the year and how to do teshuvah. So obviously you can learn from this type of behavior the proper reaction, because in Judaism we said it's only one God, there's no such a thing two gods. And therefore, if God is good and God intends to do good, therefore even the moments that things not going in our ways, God still have us in the palm of His hand and watching over us and hopefully bring good to us. Questions? I know I saw in your faces a lot of questions. Okay.